Thank you so much, Sylvia. So, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Laura. And today, like she said, we're going to be discussing drama teaching, more specifically, whether drama education is beneficial for young children. So obviously it is, because otherwise I don't think I'd have very much else to speak about today. But I'll be talking about the benefits of drama education, as well as how you can implement that into the classroom. Many people believe that you need, specialist education within drama in order to conduct sort of drama workshops and so on, which can be very helpful, and that's part of what I do. But that's not necessarily true, especially if you're only going to do a few of them, or if you're planning to run a drama ECA at the schools that you work at, that you're a part of, etc. The rundown for today, if I can change my slides. So firstly, I'm going to introduce a little bit more about who I am, because I think that's quite important in relation to this. You'll see why in a second. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the benefits of drama education. If we didn't cover that, it would be pointless to try to implement them in a classroom environment. We need to know why we're doing things in order to, create a plan as to how to do them. And then obviously also how you can implement drama within your curriculum. So whether you're a net teacher and you're wanting to include a few drama workshops into your lessons. I've actually done that, where I've gone into local schools and I've taken over an English lesson or two from, a class in each year group, and have done one-off drama workshops. But how you can do that, or how you can perhaps start a drama extracurricular activity after school, as well as some other suggestions as well. If you have any questions, please let me know, although on my computer it's quite hard to see the chat function as well. All right, so I think I'll just get started. So this is me. I'll minimize this. This is me. This is actually my current headshot, because I study acting. So like Sylvia said, I've worked in a formal education setting. I will say that I'm not a formal educator myself, so I don't have anything like a PGCE or so on. However, I'm well versed in drama education. I've conducted it in schools. I am hired as part of companies in order to do it. So that is the perspective from which I'm talking from today. And I think that's actually more beneficial to get the perspective of someone who isn't necessarily well versed. Because a curriculum can sometimes bound you to, teach things in a certain way. And the whole point of drama education in the curriculum is to sort of get outside of that. So do keep that in mind. Again, I've worked for a couple of companies. One is Dramatic English. They focus on mostly English and drama education in local schools. I personally do more so drama educations, but I've led a public speaking workshop or two. Obviously, right now, most of what we've done has been via Zoom, which has been particularly challenging. I'm sure many of you feel that teaching on Zoom has been quite challenging. And I'm currently studying an undergraduate in acting at the Hong Kong Baptist University. So this is actually a new course this year. It's a big variety of people. So I also speak from the perspective of someone who actually has obtained some of these benefits. It's allowed me to work in the field. It's allowed me to study in the field, and maybe even one day turn that into a career if I so wish to do so. So this is a picture of me in the red square. This was quite a few years ago. It makes me feel incredibly old. But drama education has benefited me in a number of ways. So I used to have major confidence issues. I'm known for being a very extroverted person now, but that was not the case when I was younger. And a lot of that has been remedied actually as a result of performance and drama workshops. It's also a creative outlet that works for me. I will talk a little bit more about that later and why I think that's important. But many people tend to believe that only certain types of people are creative. That tends to be, we tend to type people in education. That's something that I noticed working at the Australian school. Oh, this student is this, or this student is that. But everyone has the capacity to learn how to do certain things. It's just maybe because of their situation at home, or what they're naturally gifted at, they prefer to do some things other than others. And in this case, creativity is something that we all possess. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later. I think that's quite an interesting topic. I also had issues when I was younger with my language development. I'm a native English speaker. I only speak English, but I couldn't speak until the age of 6. And a lot of that was, again, remedied by teachers forcing me to, read things in front of a classroom, to perform things, doing, engaging in things like plays and so on, extracurricular activities. So it is very powerful, having something beyond the curriculum to help children that are, maybe are, a little bit late in development. And as well as that, these benefits are things that I first experienced in primary school, not through, outside activities or anything like that, but things that my primary school teachers, in my case, I only had one primary school teacher every year that I went, who would include these types of things. So if they can do that and reap the benefits, and I think all of you can today, obviously, depending on whether you're a teacher or, encouraging teachers to implement this into their curriculums. All right. So firstly, what are the benefits? I did actually want you guys to speak, but you've been told to turn off the mics, which is okay. So I'm just wondering if any of you out there, see a benefit in drama education, or if you can think of a benefit of drama education. Maybe drop it in the chat box if you can. I'll see if I can.
We can definitely unmute our microphones and speak, Laura, if you need us to.
I'm okay with it, but I was told otherwise.
No, it's purely just for when you're talking, so there's no interference or background noise, really. But yeah, for me, it's confidence. A lot of the Hong Kong students that we work with are quite often very shy and perhaps lacking confidence when they're speaking English. And you notice that in a drama setting, or when you're doing activities that are perhaps a little bit more kind of interactive and based on drama, it just helps lower their anxiety a little bit, and usually improve their confidence over time as well. They're focusing more on the fun and the movement rather than perhaps the actual speaking English aspect. So it's a confidence thing that I've noted.
Yeah, that's a very good, I talk a little bit about this as well, but especially with my work in dramatic English, that's something that I've noticed. Sometimes it's less about actually students' English ability, and it's more so about actually their confidence to speak it, especially when they're conversing with someone who is, a native English speaking teacher or a net teacher, which is, I'm assuming, the perspective that you're talking from.
Sure.
Yeah. Josh Phillips said immersion, it can help take students out of the classroom and possibly understand and practice real world language situations. So yeah, that's definitely another one. And again, that's something that I covered. Does anyone have anything else to add to that?
I just want to check that you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, lovely. I think there's just like insane amounts of benefits to drama. I currently teach it at my school as well, and it's just the ability to show kids that they can have fun and they can get things wrong and it's okay, and just not have to have them make those mistakes during a lesson when they could get in trouble or they could lose marks on something. Just showing in drama that you can get up and be anyone and do anything, and everything is okay with that. I really love teaching drama to my students because it's a chance for them to have fun, and a lot of the time in Hong Kong curriculums, they don't get to have fun a lot. They've got so much work to do. So with the drama, I think just fun, adding fun to their lives.
Definitely, I think that is true. Depending on the sort of environments that you're in. I worked in an international school, so there was a little bit more of an emphasis in sort of holistic education, but that's also something that I've noticed working in local schools is the capacity to have fun as well. When I actually go in and teach these lessons, the English teachers are quite strict and quite regimented, and that can take the fun out of being at school. And I think in order to get the most out of your education, you actually need to enjoy it. If you enjoy the process, you actually learn more. So yeah, and again, adding fun, and especially for younger children is key. All right, I would take more answers, but otherwise we'll run out of time, and there's a lot for me to get through. So I'll get started. So the first benefit, I'll just minimize this, is that it gives children the chance to practice everyday conversations. So that was one of the things that was suggested. So drama workshops, performances, and so on require children's engagement. So sometimes in lessons, if you're teaching English or you're teaching other things, but in English, some students will not speak. And in a classroom of 30 odd people, which I've definitely done workshops with kids with the classrooms of that number, it's incredibly difficult to get all of them to participate. But if they're working in groups, and if they're working, either with a script or they're working with improv games and they're required to be engaged and speak to each other, you're forcing that engagement in a good way, as opposed to pushing them and making them feel uncomfortable. There's naturally children that just speak less. Naturally, there's children that are more introverted than others. So this pushes them to try and engage with people so that they can develop that skill. In the context of Hong Kong, drama workshops also allow children to practice speaking in everyday conversation. We don't give things like Shakespeare to young children. I personally never did any Shakespeare until I started my university course. And even I find it very difficult, but you're working with scenarios in which children are familiar with and they're able to speak in. Some children, especially ones that don't use English at home, only use English in a formal education setting. And what can actually happen, something that I've noticed both working in local schools, but also being in a school with other local students, is that they're fluent. They sound too formal whenever they speak very casually. And they sound very regimented, they sound very robotic. So this allows them to practice speaking more casually. I'll say the final thing that's particularly significant for the English teachers in this meeting today is that it can allow you to identify issues within spoken language from children. Sometimes it's difficult to, especially if they are only speaking about certain things with you, in a short amount of time. If they force them to speak about, other things or daily conversation, you might actually notice that there's something wrong with, for instance, their grammar, their intonation. So, the stress or the emphasis on certain words. I don't focus on that in my particular practice, because I'm mainly focusing on the drama bit, but that is something that can be useful for you. Okay. The second benefit is the social development. Again, like I said before, some children are naturally more introverted than others, but it's still important to allow them to engage with other children. Drama workshops require the cooperation between students and children. So it forces, again, their engagement, but their engagement between different children, as well as the engagement between the teacher and the student. And this is a life skill. Think about it. When is there not a time where you need to communicate effectively with someone? Even, in these unprecedented times where a lot of us are working from home or, delivering Zoom lessons online, you still need to effectively communicate with your students in order to, even deliver a lesson. But they also need to take that for, when they enter, for instance, the workforce. Even drama workshops on Zoom require the collaborative participation of students. So it's even effective, even in otherwise unprecedented circumstances. The ability to socialize also makes children more comfortable in speaking to others. So they need to work with people. And at first that will be uncomfortable. Some children are very introverted and aren't used to speaking with loads of people. But if you kind of force them to be uncomfortable, then they will learn to be comfortable and they will learn to deal with it. Now, obviously, if you're working with special needs students, you will need to take this, with a grain of salt. But otherwise, if they're just a little bit shy, if you push them over that edge and you force them slowly, they will start to become more comfortable in talking to people. And whilst they remain introverted, they'll become, again, they will be able to socialize and hold a conversation with someone. Very powerful, particularly for young children. And this helps in a variety of things: presentations, daily conversation, etc. I don't think I need to go too much into that. The third benefit is that it develops creativity and imagination. I think sometimes this is something that's underlooked in the perspective of education, but there is a lot of benefit to, getting kids to improve upon that. This can obviously be done in certain ways, but drama is one of the ways of being able to do it. So children can be very creative, and if they don't have an outlet, they can't develop that creativity. I actually learned about something the other day in my university course. So this is something that we're still implementing, even in a professional sort of acting training atmosphere, if you will. But everyone has an imagination. Imagination is actually a reinterpretation of experience. So everyone has the ability to imagine and be creative. Without experience, we can't be creative. So it's about allowing kids to practice their creativity and practice interpreting what they've experienced, so that they don't lose that as they get older and they don't get locked into one way of thinking. That's really what creativity is thinking about possibilities. I'll say something else for some children, especially very extroverted ones. So although I was very socially awkward, I was actually naturally a very extroverted kid. I wanted to talk to kids, but I wasn't able to because I couldn't speak. It can be very difficult to find a creative outlet. If you think about painting, or if you think about, music, playing an instrument, so on. Those are all things that you do individually. It becomes much harder when you have to work with people in order to be creative. That was my case, and I've seen this, with other acting students and some kids that I've met, whilst I was a TA at the Australian school. So this gives them the great opportunity to develop that and to let them play. I think is really important. Play-based learning at the younger ages is generally what people encourage. And this is one of the ways to do that. Creativity is also something that everyone can benefit from. It's also a life skill. Creativity is not just, for the purpose of, conveying certain emotions or creating art, but it's also useful for things like, creating business pitch ideas, or, finding a new way to do something, even the teachers in the room or in the meeting today, finding a new way to, do something within a classroom that requires creativity. So it's not just for people in the arts, it's for people, beyond that. The fourth benefit, not many people have spoken about this, and this is one that's often underlooked. I will say this is particularly helpful for very young children, so about the ages of 4 to 8, maybe 9 years old. Is the physical and mental development you can actually gain from drama workshops. Often games can be quite physical, and they allow children to move in ways that they've never tried before. This is actually something we still do in a professional atmosphere, and that you do in acting schools. We actually have a class, in my case, once a week, where we practice different forms of dance. So we do ballet, jazz, tap, but other things like martial arts and even like lifting. We do all sorts of things because we're training the muscles to move in different ways. The older you get, the more locked in you are into moving in a particular way. And so actually that can be very helpful in improving a kid's physical development. That's not something that we particularly look at when we look at education. When we think of physical development, we think of, PE education, getting them to do sports. But you can actually do things beyond that that will assist them with that as well. Can also help with cognitive development. Everything in education can help with cognitive development, but we have games where we count and need to remember information. If you're working with a script, for example, the kids will need to, memorize that. So that all helps with, mental development. It's also a very good way for kids to practice their concentration. It can be very difficult working with children who can't concentrate. I know that for an absolute fact. I worked with a K3 class and also a year 1 class in my time at the Australian school. And there were some children who could not sit down and could not pay attention for even 5 seconds. And it's very infuriating. But if you actually get them to, practice their concentration in a way that's more inviting, something like a drama workshop where it's more fun and not, bound by a curriculum or by things that are, to them might be really, really difficult or boring, then they can practice their concentration and perhaps you can start to see the benefits in the actual, when you're teaching them otherwise. It also assists in emotional intelligence. So I speak speak of this very lightly because I'm, again, not a formal educator. However, I have done training where I've learned the basics of how to deal with kids with different developmental disorders. Drama games can be very useful for kids on the autistic spectrum or who have things like social development disorder, which is kind of on the autistic spectrum. Who have a hard, and specifically who have a harder time reading emotions. They will react in a very specific emotional way that most children can't understand. Obviously, this will need to be implemented with other modes of intervention and assistance, but this can be one of the ways in which they can understand other people. Understanding that, facial expressions can be a figure, things are not literal, basically. For instance, I remember I led a workshop when I was at the Australian school. It was like one of the last lessons I did there, where the kids had to pretend to be different animals. And one of the kids that I was teaching, he was on the autistic spectrum, and he's like, I can't become an animal. I'm literally not this animal. And then he saw how the other kids were becoming this animal. So understanding that things can be figurative. And whilst it wasn't completely successful, he was trying. And if we had done that a few more times, I think he would have been able to see the benefit from that. Again, I speak of that very lightly because I'm not well versed in teaching special needs children. That's not formal training that I've had. Finally, the fifth benefit that I'm going to talk about, although there are countless amounts of them, is that it's a way of getting kids to explore their interests. This is also something that I feel is not talked about, particularly in local schools. This was something, I personally went to an international primary school, and this was something that was really important about finding your passion, finding your hobbies and your interests. It's really important to find or allow kids to find what they're passionate in. It can quite literally, change their lives. It could be you that introduces drama to a student and they end up liking it so much that, they end up studying at the HKAPA or, at the Baptist University, for instance, studying acting, and then maybe even pursuing it as a full-time career. For me, for example, because of my primary school teacher doing drama workshops with us, and also I had to do the nativity play when I was in primary 1, it's led me to allow to teach drama. It gave me an insight into teaching. So it was actually because of my drama experience that I started helping to teach drama. And then it was because of that experience that I started working at a formal education setting. So it quite literally has affected my development in my career. The other thing that I will say is that in an increasingly stressful world, having a hobby that you truly love can help keep you stable. So this is encouraging good habits. These days, I find that less and less people have, a solid hobby that they stick to. And I think that a hobby, something that you really like, that you're passionate in, something that you go to, once a week or on the weekend, whether it's drama or other things, allows you to escape from working life. And especially in Asia where, the work-life balance isn't as good, this can be a really good thing for students in order to keep on top of their mental health as well. That's something that I've benefited from, and I've seen other people benefit from around me as well. So those are the benefits. There are plenty more, but those are the ones that I think are significant in this application. So now that we know what the benefits are, how do we actually implement drama into the classroom? So there are many ways to do this. You can include like an activity here and there. And I would say probably the best thing to do this in is an English lesson. You can include activities here and there that have a little bit of a performative background. So, get them to, do a speech in front of everyone or so on. But if you're wanting to actually do a drama workshop, how do we actually do that? I have a little bit of a formula because I've been doing this for quite a while. I think this is my 4th year actually doing these sorts of drama workshops. So I have a lot of experience in that. And then I also study acting professionally now as well. So that's given me some insight as to what I can include in my practice. So I want to share some of that with you today. So this is very basic. The three components of any drama workshop or training, and professional atmospheres will do this. Workshops within schools will do this. Workshops that are done by youth theater companies will do this. It all has a very similar structure. Firstly is the warm up. And something that I've included in my practice is that it should be focused on relaxation and concentration. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. That's something that I've learned quite recently. The second element, and that should take probably quite a bit more time of the lesson. Again, depending on how old it is, how old the children or the students that you're teaching are, is doing games, or I call them improv games, that are focused around the objective of your lesson. I'll talk about objectives a little bit later. And then third is devising and performance. That's where you'll see the most discrepancy in terms of age range. So the way that you approach doing that with young children is very different from how you would do them with 10, 11, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and so on. So part one, the warm-up. So I remember in school, primary school, secondary school, we would sometimes call these like starter activities. But if you have a warm-up exercise in your classroom that you do before you actually start teaching the bulk of your lesson, that is used in order to ease students into the lesson. And the warm-up in a drama workshop is the same. It eases them into it. It also gets them to concentrate. So this is one of the elements I talked about just now. Concentration is important because you need to be in the present moment in order to learn, but also do the exercises that are to come. If the kids aren't concentrating, no matter what you do, you will not be able to successfully go through your drama workshop. They'll just kind of go crazy and run around. And I've had experiences where this has actually happened. I'm sure some of you have had this happen in your lessons as well. And then relaxation. This is something that is not focused as much on, but I think it can be very, very valuable because you cannot act well when you are tense. You can't speak in front of people, especially at a young age, when you feel very tense. So it's important to make kids feel comfortable and relaxed and at ease. And depending on whether the group that you're working with is very, very low energy or very, very high energy, you can sort of make the warm-up different to suit the particular needs of that class. So here are some suggestions for warm-up exercises. I will show you a video of one of these games. I can't show you all of them because we'll be here all day, but Captain's Coming. So this is a game where you give out different commands. So you're the game master, as I like to call it, and each command requires you to do something different. So it's a very physical warm-up exercises, and it's great for low energy classes. There's another one called Zip Zap Boing. This is a game in which you pass a zip around the circle. So you'll have the students standing around in a circle, and you say zip, and like that will make it travel around the circle. You can also zap. So you will point to someone usually across from you, and that will send the zap to that direction, and then they can choose to zip or zap it. And then boing rejects the zip. So the zip will go the other way around. This is great for classes that have issues concentrating. And this is also a very easy one to understand. So it's good for younger children, not really young children, but past the age of 7, usually it works quite well. And the final one that I've done for some classes is a visualization activity. I wouldn't recommend doing this for a class that you're teaching for the first time, but rather maybe if you're doing a couple or a few drama workshops and you know that the class is very high energy, this can help bring them down a little bit. So you basically get the kids to lie down on the floor. Now, in times of COVID, this is not very practical. It's not very hygienic. So maybe getting them to sit would be a better thing to do, and get them to close their eyes, and then in a very relaxing, approachable voice, talk them through an imaginary scene, which is relaxing. So usually you could talk through a forest or the beach and ask them to imagine what they can sense. So, if you're talking about a beach, touching and feeling the sand, feeling the warmth of the sun. So again, this is great for older kids who are very high energy. This is also something that we do in a professional environment as well, but it's quite easy to implement. So, all people can benefit from maybe including this in their drama workshops. I've done it a few times and it seems to work quite well. Here is my video. Sylvia, I'm going to ask you whether you can hear this. Hopefully it loads up.
Yeah, I can. I can
Okay,
hear.
perfect.
Yeah.
So this is the game, Captain's Coming, that I was talking to you a little bit about. This is how to play it. Forgive the intro music, but this is a really good game. If the kids are not very responding to, or if the class that you're teaching is not doesn't respond very well to new things, this will get them very excited for sure. It's always been a winner. Obviously, I think nowadays this would be a lot harder to do because it requires a big group of people, and we shouldn't really be keeping the kids in big groups for the sake of their safety. But hopefully when things get better, we can, start to do things more regularly, if you will.
Hey guys, this game is called Captain's Coming, and you're going to have a blast. The goal of this game is to be the fastest and the most accurate carrying out the captain's orders. The captain will be on stage with a microphone telling you what to do. The actions are as follows. The first action is Captain's Coming. For this action, you want to stand as straight as you can and salute to the captain. The next one is at ease. This one, you want to stand straight and put your arms behind your back. The next action that you have to do is called Man Overboard. On this one, you need a partner. So you're going to find the closest person next to you, and one person has to get down on all fours, and the next person will put their foot on their back and look for a person that has gone overboard. The next action that you will do is called Row, Row, Row Your Boat. This action will be where 3 people get in a row, all sitting together, and they'll pretend like they're rowing a boat. But the catch is you have to be singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat, or you will be eliminated. Another action that the captain might call is Swim to Shore. On this one, you'll have to get all the way down on your belly and pretend like you're swimming. These are the actions that you have to complete when the captain calls them. In order to be eliminated, you are either not doing the action correctly or you are probably not going fast enough. For all of these actions, if you're the last person to complete them, you'll probably be eliminated. A leader will come around and tap you twice on the shoulder so that you'll be out. So go fast. The next action is
So these are more active. I'll stop it there. There are many more things that you could do in terms of this activity. There are a lot more commands that you can have. If you search online, there's plenty of them. But you can also make things up. So I've made one up where it's you become a shark. So this worked very well for very young children, and they get on their stomachs and they pretend to be a shark and growl. That often gets them very excited. So you can actually manipulate it to suit different age ranges as well. Very, very physical activity. Captain's Coming. It's one of my favorites. I actually really like playing it myself. The next section of a drama workshop would be, I call these improv games. It's not necessarily always improvisation, but a lot of the times it is. So I just lump that into a category. So in these games, this is where you're going to set, you have your sort of objectives being, taught. So depending on what your objectives are. So if you're wanting to improve the concentration of the class, if you're wanting them to get to practice speaking, if you just want them to have fun, even, these games will tailor your, objectives for the lesson. So again, all lessons should have a focus, and depending on what you want to get out of your drama workshop, you can play different improv games to meet those objectives. Now, there are plenty of resources online where you can find these, or if all else fails, you can talk to someone involved in the drama atmosphere. I will say that even people that used to do any sort of drama, so whether, they did it in high school, or maybe they were they were involved in their university's drama club or something like that, would remember a game or two. It's worth asking around, actually, and there'll be more people than you anticipate who, remember certain things. There are games that I remember from when I was 5 years old that I haven't played in years, but I still remember how to play them. So I'm going to give you an example. So let's say that I wanted my students to improve their cooperation with each other, and I had an hour to conduct the lesson. So for the warm-up, I'd probably play 10 minutes of Captain's Coming if they were a very low energy class. And then I have my 2 improv games. I can't talk about all the improv games that you can do. Again, do your research, and they're usually quite easy to follow. So one of them is called One-Worded Stories. I'll explain that. And there's one that I call Body Improv. We never really have a name for this, but for the purposes of today, I will call it Body Improv. And then you have Devising and Performing, which is 20 minutes. So I, depending on how big the class is, 15 for prep and maybe 5 or 10 minutes for performing. So this is how you play one-worded stories. For any of the net teachers here, this might be one that is particularly useful. For some students, they respond very well to it. For some students, they don't. So that's also something that you'll need to gauge depending on their English ability. But it also gets them to cooperate with each other. That's why I've included it as an example here.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Eric with Northwest Children's Theater, and welcome back to Theater Games Thursday, where you can learn to play fun theater games with your family and friends in the safety of your own home. Today's game is One-Word Story.
Rolling!
This game can be played with as many players as you'd like, but we will be using 3 for our demonstration today.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm Andy.
I'm Clyde.
Players sit in a circle. Decide who will be starting the story.
I'll go first. Okay.
That person says a single word to begin telling the story.
When Peter,
The person to their left says the second word in the sentence, and the third player adds the third word, and that continues around the circle.
Went
down, around,
the
windy staircase.
The objective is to tell a coherent story, one word at a time. Make sure that it all makes sense and that you work together as a team to make coherent sentences. Don't just say random words to be funny.
Books, usually.
penguin.
Where, there,
Macaroni.
That said, do have fun with it.
when Peter,
Went
down, around,
the
windy staircase,
he
discovered a
giant
humongous haunted
banana.
The game ends once the team has made a whole story, which includes an introduction, climax, and resolution. And that's it. Thanks for joining me for another.
So that's the second game. This can be altered. So in my experience with this game, with some classes, they respond very well to it, and they understand that, you know, they don't need to just say something funny. They need to make a story that makes sense, and there's that uses, correct grammar and so on. But for some classes, they don't respond as well to it. So in that case, I've modified it in the past by doing one sentence stories. So each child will be able to say a sentence. That often, you want kids to cooperate. So I think it's better to use the modified version as opposed to forcing them to do the one-worded story, because otherwise you'll never be able to achieve a story that makes sense and that is cohesive. And you can still get a lot of the same benefits by making them say a sentence as opposed to, one particular word. If you're working with native English speakers, then usually this game works just fine for, again, a variety of age groups. Go to the next slide. The second one is body shape improv. This is, I couldn't find a clip online about it, but in this, you get students to work together to make different things within a group. So usually it's a group of 4 to 5, maybe 3 if the group that the class that you're working with is very small, but usually about 4 to 5. So you get them to make different things in a group with their body. So using the letter, making the letter A, you usually start with letters, an object, so like a table, maybe an animal like a cat or a dog or a mouse, etc. And the key here is that they need to work together in order to do this. That's doing many things. Number one, it's achieving our objective, which is to cooperate. Number two, it's allowing them to be creative because they're doing something that's, otherwise not normal. They have to figuratively think of how they can make the letter A or a table with their body, even though it probably won't look like one. And also it's physically demanding as well. It allows them to move in different ways. And if you do this over time, that it can be beneficial if that's something that you care about within your teaching practice. Eventually you can move on to doing things like scenes. So, how can you make the bedroom? So one person can be the bed, one person can be a dresser or a lamp, or one person can, I've seen people that have become a door or a laptop on top of a table. Children can actually be very creative in doing these sorts of activities. Sometimes you need to give them a little bit of a push. And emphasize that it's not going to look perfect, because they have, a lot of them will like try and make a perfect looking chair, and they're holding a squat position for like 20 minutes trying to do so. So keep in mind it's a figurative activity, as opposed to making it look so literal and so perfect. We're not aiming for perfection here. The final bit is devising and performance. This is something I'll say is less important for younger children, but if you do intend to include this for younger children, you want to focus on only using the objectives in your particular lesson to help them devise. So for instance, we do something called freeze frames, very similar to body improv, but again, it's more so those scenarios. So if you told them to make 5 different freeze frames, you will tell them, okay, I want you to make a story using all of these 5 things, and make it very easy. Give them a lot of time to prepare, and then also the performance shouldn't be as long so that they can think of things and you can actually have the time to help them out. The older they are, the more the creative freedom you can give them. And I think I would encourage that actually, to give them more creative freedom, but you still want them to focus on the activities done in the lesson. Otherwise, they've gained nothing from the particular activities you've done. In terms of suggestions for working in groups, I know that in a classroom environment, you want to be checking in on all of, if you're ever doing group work, you want to check on all of the kids to make sure what they're doing is right. But I would say actually in a drama environment, as long as you can see that they're working together and they're actually making progress, I would say let them explore. Again, it's something that is allowing them to develop their creativity without the support of a teacher. Now, in the case that they don't really do much, it's your job to help facilitate that. And I will say it's much easier for some kids to work together than others. You might have put a grouping together and, people don't like each other and you're not aware of that. So you need to step in and get them to cooperate, or maybe give them an idea to start on. If they are younger, I would say mix up the groups based on their capability. If it's a very rowdy class, I would say the same thing. And if you're doing a lot of drama workshops with the kids, then I would say, again, mix it up. If you're doing 1 or 2, then I don't think it really matters. And it can be nice if kids work with people that they know doing something new. Other things that you can do, so you can create a drama ECA. This will obviously require more commitment, and depending on your position in a particular school, you might be able to do this, you might not. It's a lot more challenging, but it also allows you to cover a lot more. So you can do these workshops without worrying that you won't cover this in your curriculum. You won't have the time to finish what you're required to in your curriculum. This will also require a bit of research if you're not well versed in different drama activities, if you haven't done much of it before. Organizing a school musical, this is very involved. But when I was working at the Australian school, this was actually something that everyone was participating in. Even, me being quite new to the school, I was helping out with this. And you can receive help from other departments within the school. So if you have a visual arts department, they can make the props, for instance. If you have a music department, maybe the kids can, you can get the kids to play certain songs and what have you. And if you're in a position where, you work maybe in leadership within a school, and you want all of the kids to gain benefits, this might be a good way to get them to participate all together. Of course, if you want something that's a bit more detailed, especially for older children, contacting a company offering drama education is also possible. So the two that I've worked for is Faust. They more so are geared, if they do work with schools, they work primarily with international ones. That's just the clientele that they target. And then Dramatic English is more so, they work specifically with local schools for the most part, having a sort of, they want to both improve English and also introduce drama in these schools. They have those are their sort of two objectives. So very different companies. There's other ones out there, and there's also freelance teachers out there as well that you can hire, who would be very happy to lead something like this. Obviously, depending on if their schedule allows for it. If, for instance, most actors in Hong Kong, especially English-speaking ones, will usually teach in some capacity, either with a company or by themselves. And so if you do a bit of research, you can usually contact these people. So that's all from me. Does anyone have any particular questions about what I've spoken about today? I'm all ears. Or any clarification?
I don't want to ask my question before anyone's asked any questions about drama, but my question is more directed towards you and like your career and how you found yourself to becoming a drama workshop facilitator and leader. Like, how did you go about that?
Very good question. So when I was actually a student of Faust International when I was much younger. So I started doing workshops with them when I was about 14. And they have student and assistant leaders that help with workshops. So because I was a student in high school at the time, I worked, I was in their senior group, which they hold lessons in Shengwan. I used to be part of the DB group because I lived in Lantau at the time. So I started teaching there on a Saturday. That work experience allowed me to work at the Australian International School. And that was my introduction into the formal education sector. A lot of international schools hire TAs without prior experience. In the Australian International Schools case, the TAs in the early childhood section, there's one for every class. So they work more as a co-teacher. So I would help to teach those classes. And then this year, I was put in contact with someone that was working at Dramatic English, and that's how I started there at the same time as I started my degree. So it's quite rare for that to happen, but it happened to me, and that's caused me to have the experience that I have.
I've got a question, Laura. At the moment, I mean, hopefully with vaccine rollout and things, we'll be going back to face-to-face teaching sometime in the future for extracurricular activities I'm talking about, rather than incorporating drama into the classroom at the moment. But I'm wondering if you've had, or if you could talk about any advice for people who might be interested in incorporating drama or elements of drama into the online curriculum. Because I think that's something that for at least some teachers, we might be still having to consider.
Very good question. I will say, and I'll be very honest, because of the situation, the amount of work that I do for Dramatic English in this particular, who I'm working with particularly now, is a lot less. And that's because of the impracticality of it. So I can, but it is still something that can be done. What I will say is that the main thing that you will want to be doing is focusing on the collaborative element and focusing on games where it does not require physical interaction between one another. So one word stories is a good example of doing that. And also I would say the other thing is that it's a lot more effective when you include it in another curriculum. So in our case, the work that I have been doing has been focused around English education. So I even did a workshop where this particular school was a Catholic one, and they wanted us to do drama games which promoted certain particular Catholic values. So integrating, certain drama games or elements of different drama games into, for instance, English education would be the best way to go about it. Other than that, in order to get the full effective drama education, you are going to have the students in, and that's like education in general. You want the kids in, especially at a young age, in order to deliver lessons most effectively. So that would be my suggestions for that.
Thanks.
No problem.
I would love if you had the answer to this, and I would be so amazed if you do, but if you don't, it's okay. But I'm currently teaching drama at the moment, and I'm online, of course. But my classes are only 25 minutes, and I only see my students once every 14 working school days.
Wow, okay.
Got any tips to try and help me encourage them to still pay attention and still get involved in the lesson, because they don't see me that often. Of course, they're not going to be of course they're not going to care that much, but yeah, it's very difficult. So if you've got any tips, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I understand. 25 minutes is a very short time. I would say that if you want them to be engaged specifically, you need to find a warm-up game that really works for them. That can actually be the key in determining how the rest of your lesson goes out, much like if you were in a school and you did a starter activity that made the kids really excited and wanted to learn. So that will require digging and a little bit of trial and error before you find that. The other thing is, obviously, you can't really devise or perform. So you want to be focusing probably on one game in more detail, explain it a little bit more, because again, you are online, and then hopefully get them to interact. Even starting by using the chat function. Some students have an issue with seeing themselves on camera. So even starting by, asking them to, participate via the chat function, depending on what you're doing, might help as well. And then eventually, encouraging them to turn on their cameras. That's a big thing I've seen, is everyone wants to switch off their camera.
Yeah, that is true. Thank you so much.
No problem.